The Chabad Hasidic movement has begun its legal proceedings against Russia. Representatives of the Chabad are demanding Russia's control of the Alexander Courtyard church compound to be frozen unless they return the Schneerson Library archives. Now, those library archives are a historical collection of the global Chabad movement, and the collection includes approximately 12,000 books and original writings, which were gradually collected and preserved since the 18th century. The Schneerson Library is a unique collection that belongs to the dynasty of rabbis before the Russian Revolution was nationalized by the Soviet government in the 1920s. Now, this all comes as Russia announced its plan to close the Jewish agency in Moscow. An Israeli delegation has been in Moscow now for the last week and is expected to meet with their Russian counterparts today. The next hearing on the matter will be August 19th. Our correspondent Mike Wagenheim spoke with Stephen Lieberman, the attorney who is representing the Chabad in the long-running case.
I mean, we're not talking about dollars. We're not talking about barrels of oil. We're talking about books that are venerated by members of the Chabad movement and by many, many thousands and millions of Jews around the world. These are the books that were actually part of the Rebbe's library. They were books that Chabad Rebbe's wrote in, their notes and letters that were penned by the Rebbe's. These are holy materials akin to, in the Catholic world, the Shroud of Turin. They have metaphysical meaning of great importance. And we don't know why Russia won't give them back. They're plainly not important to Vladimir Putin. They're plainly not important to the Russian people. These are the patrimony of the Jewish people. They're part of the holy archives of the Chabad movement. And again, because Russia only understands power, we've gone to the courts and we've obtained orders requiring Russia to give those books back. And essentially, what Russia has said to us is, if you don't have an army, we're not giving the books back. So we're applying whatever pressure we can. And the latest step in the process is the request to the Israeli government to withhold the transfer of the Alexander compound.
Moscow never expressed in the longevity of all these court cases why they feel they have a right to possess this property?
No. In fact, the Russian courts back in the early 1990s actually ordered the Russian agencies that had control of the library and the archive to return them to Chabad. And then, of course, there was chaos in Russia. There was a refusal to obey the order by the administrative officials who actually threatened the lives of the Chabad representatives who came to collect the books. And whenever we've asked why they won't return the books, the answer is simple. They say, this is an asset of the Russian people. This is a cultural asset of the Russian people. And you know what? That's just complete bunk. The Russian people couldn't care less about these books. They belong to the Jewish people. They belong to Chabad.
So now that the Israeli government is involved in this and Chabad has petitioned the Israeli Attorney General, as you mentioned, to condition the transfer of the Alexander Courtyard on the release of the Chabad archives, even that case goes back a little bit. The previous Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, had promised the Alexander Courtyard to Russia in exchange, ironically enough, for a prisoner being held by Russia to be released to Israel. Now, the Jerusalem District Court struck down that transfer. It's now kind of held up by government action at this point. Where do you feel this is going with the Israeli Attorney General? How may that office be able to help, or do you feel this is kind of stuck in a loop now, especially with the transitional government in Israel?
Well, I think the more pressure that can be applied to the Russian Federation, the better. The Russian Federation plainly wants the Alexander compound. It's important to the Russian Federation. Hopefully, this will bring them to the table. In the Jewish religion, we have a halachic obligation to redeem captives. We're supposed to do whatever we can to redeem captives. These books are captives. We're trying to free them.